But let's be honest, right? I'm sure you've seen a lot of comedians in your day. You know, I know I've had my share of audiences, you know. But it didn't last. So I want this to be different, so. We're doing comedy at a church. Like, how's this gonna work out, really? I mean, some people are like, I just came to see this thing explode. What's so amazing about doing comedy at church, when I was a kid, laughing at church was illegal. You couldn't laugh at church. I remember one time laughing at church because this lady was jumping around and her wig fell off. So, that stuff was funny. Her wig fell off and then I laughed, my grandmother would pinch and twist. I can understand a pinch. You gonna twist? That's the devil. Church was the worst. Oh my goodness. Church lasts like 6 hours. Dude on stage is mad at everybody. I can't figure out why he's so angry. 7 years old, I figured out why he was so angry. He was angry because he had some phlegm caught in his throat. So at the end of every sentence, he'd try to get it out. He'd be like, the Lord said, act like you. I'm like, Grandma, he need to gargle, Grandma. I'm 7 years old, man. Church lasts 6 hours, too. Then we go in the basement and eat a sandwich and come back up. I'm like, what was that, halftime or something? Actually, I'm gonna be real with you. There's enough black people here. It was always chicken. Why we always gotta eat chicken? Every single time. I know, I had to tell them. I'm sorry, we at church, you know? And tuna. At the end of church, they would ask us, I was like, so you wanna go? After this, we all gonna go to the sister church. I don't even like the brother church. One time I get to church, 7 years old, there's a dead body in the front. It's a funeral. Nobody explains that to a 7-year-old Michael Jr. I'm thinking that's how they roll. Like every 3 weeks or so, they bring a dead body in as an example or something. And the dude on stage yell at everybody in the audience like they the ones that did it. I remember asking my grandmother, I'm looking for some explanation. I'm like, Grandma, what happened to the man in the box? What happened to the man in the box? Her whole explanation was, he in a better place. I'm like, what kind of box did he live in before? We weren't even poor, we were po. We couldn't afford the other letters, man. We had no money. Look, I was actually being sponsored by a family from Haiti. When you're poor, your creativity excels. Like it really, really excels. I remember I wanted an action figure when I was 10 years old. I wanted an action figure so bad. My birthday came along. My dad hands me a box. I open it up. It's empty. He said, it's Invisible Man. I was like, that is awesome. I played with that thing for like 3 weeks, man. So my brother hid it from me. We played games. We just made up games. We played this one game called Talk About You. The instructions were to just talk about you. That's all we did. We talked about each other. My friends would talk about me, but like, Michael Jr., you got some big feet. And I was good at this game. I was like, oh yeah, well you so dark skinned. I bet if you ride a motorcycle, you get a ticket for tinted windows. It's hilarious. White people looking for black people, make sure they can laugh. Is it okay? It's okay? You sure? No?
Say the Jesus Creed. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and all your strength. And the second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these.
So on Friday, it was book day, and it was so cool just walking to school and just seeing kids dressed up in their favourite book characters. And I'm going to show you a picture of a few of our kids in Team JC. We've got Cat in the Hat and Thing 1 and Thing 2. We've got Harry Potter and we've got an elephant. And I think the kids just love dressing up as someone different. And, you know, being going to school as a Thing 1 or Thing 2, it just made them feel different about themselves. But it also got me thinking as well about how often we maybe go along in life wearing a mask. I saw lots of Spider-Men and Batmans on the way to school as well, and their total face was covered and they were acting out as if they were Spider-Man. But how often do we go along acting as someone that we're not, or dressing as someone that we're not? And it got me thinking to 1 Corinthians 11 verse 1, and it says, "And you should imitate me just as I imitate Christ." What does imitate mean? It means to take or follow as a role model and to copy a person. Now I wonder how many kids would have had the idea of dressing up as Jesus today as their role model, or as the book that they love to read being the Bible. And I wonder how many of us adults go into our workplace and we imitate Jesus. And I'm sure a lot of us do, but I'm sure some of us also struggle with that whole thing. And I wonder how we can encourage each other more to just imitate Jesus. And what does that mean? It means loving the person that is really hard to love. It means being friends maybe with the person that is really hard to get along with at school. It just means reaching out to those that need it and need help. It just means the words that we use aren't words that we hear in our society, the negative words, maybe the swear words that we hear sometimes our friends say, or the people that we work with. And my challenge this week is just to say, just as the kids dressed up on book day on Friday, how do we go into our work where we're not dressed up, we haven't got signs to say I'm a Christian, but can people tell by your words and your actions that there is something different about you, that we're not just slotted into society like everybody else, thinking negative things, saying negative things, but actually we're going to stand out, not in a way that is cringy, not in a way that is makes us look weird, but in a way it will make us look weird, But just how do we go about our lives next week with our friends, with our work people, just displaying things of Jesus? What does that mean? It means we just go and be the love around people, like I said before, and being the friend to someone. But we need to be encouraged by imitating Jesus. We need to be more proactive about showing Jesus to those around us. And how can you be doing that this week?
The greatest day in history. Death is beaten, you have rescued me. Sing it out, Jesus is alive. The empty cross, the empty grave, life eternal, you have won the day. Shout it out, Jesus is alive. He's alive. You've washed my sin away. Oh, happy day, I'll never be the same. Forever I am changed. When I stand in that place, free at last, meeting face to face, I am yours, Jesus, you are mine. Endless joy, perfect peace, earthly pain finally will cease. Celebrate, Jesus is alive. He's alive. And oh, happy day, you've washed my sin away. Oh, happy day, I'll never be the same. Forever I am changed. And oh, what a glorious day. What a glorious way that you have saved me. And oh, what a glorious day. What a glorious name, Jesus. Oh, happy day, you've washed my sin away. Oh, happy day, I'll never be the same. Forever I am changed. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I worship Your holy name. The sun comes up, it's a new day dawning. It's time to sing the end draws near and my time has come. Still my soul will sing your praise unending. 10,000 years and then forevermore. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name. I will worship your holy name. I'll worship your holy name.
I just wanted to this week look at a subject that's been on my mind and on my heart for quite a while. We believe and we teach and we say the truth that God is faithful, that God is the God who answers prayer. He said he would and he does. That God is the God who looks after us and protects us. He said he would and he does. That God is the God who supplies our needs and who is a loving father and who cares for his children. And he is all of those things. But at the same time, we all experience occasions when our prayers go unanswered. And it seems like, well, we're praying according to your will, Lord. We're praying that people we love come to know you. We're praying that people get healed. Sometimes we find that finance isn't easy. Sometimes we find that things don't go well, that things don't go according to plan. And we can respond in those times in one of two ways. The first way is we can pretend that God has done it when he doesn't seem to have done. And that's a kind of a charismatic version of living in unreality. I believe in trusting God despite the circumstances, and in the circumstances. I don't believe that we can in our minds change circumstances. Sometimes the honest truth is our prayers don't seem to be answered. The things we long for don't happen. The things we thought he said to us do not come to pass. And if we pretend that that's not the case, then we actually end up living a Christian life that is not based in reality, but is more about fantasy. The second way that we can react that I think isn't very healthy is by saying, well, God isn't trustworthy. He doesn't answer my prayers. He isn't faithful. He doesn't look after me. And the ultimate of that is I hear people saying, well, I can't believe in a God who let this happen to me. And that is also living in unreality, because it's living in the unreality of God's love and grace and mercy, and not understanding that he is bigger than our circumstances. And so it's saying, these are our circumstances. We're not going to pretend that they're not, but we will trust you anyway. And there's three guys, three friends that I want to look at that express that in my mind perfectly. And they are called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And their big story can be found in Daniel chapter 3. And they're part of the exile with Daniel, their friend, in Babylon. And King Nebuchadnezzar is there. And he made a big statue of that everyone was to bow down and worship. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, we're not going to do that. And so King Neb was pretty cross with them. And he says to them, he was furious with rage. It says in Daniel 3, verse 13. And he summoned them. And he said, right, seeing as you won't bow to the image I've made, I'm going to put you in a furnace and I'm going to put you to death. And listen to how they respond. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods and worship the image of gold you have set up. Now, I love King Neb's response. He was a guy that was guided more by his emotions of the moment than by rationality. Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude towards them changed. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. Now, the furnace is a furnace full of fire. If you're thrown into a furnace of fire, even if it's a cool fire, you die. And he says, right, throwing them into fire isn't enough. I want it to be burned 7 times hotter than usual. And he throws them in. And I love what they said. Our God can deliver us, and he will deliver us. We believe in a God who answers prayer. We believe in a God who looks after us. But even if he doesn't, we're still going to trust him when we don't see the answer this side of heaven. And that, my friends, is a mature Christian response. And they chose to trust him. And they were thrown into the fiery furnace. And he didn't rescue them. He didn't stop them from being thrown into the furnace. He didn't do that. But what he did is he came into the furnace with them. Nebuchadnezzar was looking and he said, wait a minute, we threw 3 in. There's a 4th who looks like the son of a god. Jesus, in his pre-incarnation, he was in the furnace with them. And there are times when we don't seem to get the answers we longed for. We don't understand what God is up to. But in those times when we're in the fiery furnace of life, when everything seems to be going wrong, our story is he comes into the furnace with us, and he stands with us, and he burns with us, and he comforts us in our weakness and in our brokenness. And what I love about this story is King Neb, who was furious with them. He sees that their God has looked after them, and he gets them out, and they don't even smell of burning. Not a hair is singed. How about that? And they end up getting promoted. But there must have been a moment as they were thrown into the fiery furnace when they thought, he hasn't answered. He hasn't rescued us. And then the joy they must have felt when in the midst of the furnace, they were with him. Sometimes, my friends, when life goes wrong, when things don't work out as we hoped, there can be, for the people of God, an incredible moment, an incredible joy. You, God, are in the furnace with me. There have been moments in my life, many moments, when God has answered my prayer, when my testimony is God has looked after me. God has been there for me. God has protected me. God has provided for me. And there have been other moments where I haven't understood what's going on, where I have struggled, where it's felt like failure, where it's felt really tough. And do you know, my story is, you were with me in the darkest days, in the darkest nights, in the times of most pain. You were there in the fiery furnace. And there was nothing like knowing your presence in the midst of my pain because you are bigger. You are greater than everything. Nothing can separate us from the love of God, neither death nor life, says Paul. None of it. God bless you. Keep walking with him. He is faithful, and he expresses it, his faithfulness, in many different ways.
While I was listening to Mike, I got the feeling that I've heard all of this before. But the new angle he has brought on that is quite incredible. And he is spot on. When it comes to prayers not quite being answered, many people pretend that it has been answered, and we do live in that fantasy world. But quite frankly, in my experience, more and more people, when their prayers are not answered the way they want their prayers to be answered, they respond in that other way, that they cannot trust God, that they cannot rely on God to do what they want God to do. And yet the response that we see from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is quite powerful. Let's quickly read it out loud again. So, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered, King Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to make any response to this. If our God, whom we revere, exists, he's able to rescue us from the red-hot blazing furnace, and he'll rescue us from your hand, your majesty. But if he doesn't, be it known to you, your majesty, that we won't revere your gods or bow down to the gold statue that you have set up. How do these three guys get to a place where they are confident that God will rescue them, but if he doesn't do what they want God to do, their response will be not to blame him, not to say to everybody, we cannot trust him, not to go, we cannot rely on him, but to respond in a way that brings honor to God. How did they get there? It's a question that has boggled guys like myself as a pastor and a theologian for many, many, many years. And only recently does it all fall into place. As good Jewish boys would have known, they would have known the stories of their people. They would have known and would have celebrated the incredible act of redemption that had happened under the Exodus, with God freeing his people from Pharaoh. They would have known the promises made to Abraham. They would have known that slowly being worked out. And as they found themselves in exile, as Mark was talking about, and here under the pressure to bow down to King Nebuchadnezzar, because they knew the story they were a part of, because they understood the story they found themselves in, they were able to respond the way they did. So often the response people have to God not answering prayers the way they want is quite frankly a discipleship issue. They have never understood that what Christianity offers them is a whole new story. It is a story that starts right from the very beginning and is a story that will continue even past the end as we know it. The story of God, the King Jesus gospel, is absolutely huge. Too many Christians today have got the ticket to heaven. They have ticked the boxes that they need to get to heaven, but have never taken the time to allow the story of God to become the default story that they begin to use as they go about in their day-to-day lives. The whole point of our morning devotion since the beginning of the year has been to get you and I into this incredible narrative, the story. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego knew the story of their people. Do you know the story of your people? Our people don't just start with Jesus. Our people starts right at the very point of creation. It is woven into Israel's story. In fact, the last morning devotion of this past week was reminding us that when we look at the Bible, we look at the Old Testament through the eyes of King Jesus. The New Testament is a response to the work of King Jesus, that Jesus was and is God's plan to redeem and restore the world. That is so huge and so important. And so, these moments, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, as they were looking into the past, their ancestors and their response to what God was doing, they were able to say, God is going to rescue us. But if he doesn't, we will not bow down. In the exact same breath, our response, as we understand the story that we're a part of, knowing that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, real people, real places, real faith, real struggle, as they went through exile, as they went through patches where it felt like God was 1,000,000 miles away, because they knew the story they were a part of, they were able to respond the way they did. In the same way, our ancestors, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, should inspire us that if God doesn't quite respond the way we want him to, our response is to bring him glory. Why? Because we're part of the King Jesus gospel. I cannot implore to each one of you enough to embrace, learn, understand, and get involved in the story we find ourselves in. Real discipleship is not about telling each other what we must or must not do. Real discipleship is getting each other into the apostles' teaching. Acts chapter 2 verse 42. And the apostles' teaching was to get the early church to look at the entire story of God through the eyes of Jesus. You want to do it? Go onto Grapevine Church Durbanville's YouTube page. Click on the icon. Find playlists. Go down to Devotions Week 1. Open, start on day 1. And the whole point of these devotions is to get us thinking about the big story that we are a part of, so that we have the context to do life and the context to respond when things don't quite go the way we want them to go. What does God do? Well, as we read, he meets Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the furnace. The fourth person was Jesus himself. And sometimes that is what we need. Do you find yourself struggling with faith? Do you find yourself struggling to make it all fit together? It could be, and in 99.9% times like those, it is around lack of true discipleship. True discipleship is getting into the story. Do you want to start? Dive into our devotions. And as we are slowly and painfully working towards meeting again, the heart of what we want to do when we gather is to inspire each other to live out God's story, the King Jesus gospel, into the world. And as it becomes our default story, you and I will be able to deal with the struggles, disappointments, trials that come our way. Let me encourage you to take time to get into that narrative, into the gospel. You're part of a community that is offering you the chance to do it on a plate. All you need is YouTube. Go for it. Let's get into the story so that the default is what God is saying and not what we think he is saying that often the world is saying. I want to inspire you today to do that. God bless you.
My Jesus, my Savior, Lord, there Jesus, my Savior. Lord, there is none like you. All of my days I want to praise the wonders of your mighty love. My comfort, my shelter, tower of refuge and strength. Let every breath, all that I am, never cease to